we constantly talk about getting the arm out on time and avoiding that arm drag, right? We don't want to be late. I think it's fairly mainstream to identify that being late is bad. Okay, so we put such a focal point on, okay, got to get the hand out, got to get the arm out, and now it's up, and now we're going. So the breakdown, like I said, early arm raise, and I'll kind of talk about some few key points that make sense in regards to affecting power output, affecting rotational energy, and so on and so forth. So when we look at hand separation and kind of, you know, at what point are the hands being separated, and then at what point does the athlete enter his drive phase, and then what does the hand slash arm do during the drive phase? We see a commonality. I think I did a Cole breakdown on, there's the delay mechanism for guys that kind of occurs somewhere down here, and then when the arm goes to raise, we see into that retraction, a hold retraction, and then go. We see a commonality of the timing of rear hip internal rotation with arm raise. So you know, when we're talking about early arm raise, guys just getting it out, getting it up, and then driving, is we see the breakdown not only of the timing of internal rotation and the maximizing of the kinetic energy from the ground, right? We want to make sure that the rotations are occurring on time to maximize everything coming up through the kinetic chain at once. We're trying to limit the amount of breakdowns or timing sequences in the kinetic chain, right? So if a guy basically separates and raises his arms while he's entering his drive phase, now we see a breakdown which now forces the athlete to generate more energy with his arm rather than allowing the rotation of the lower half and arm trunk rotation to happen at the same time. So the thing that I've been seeing a lot of times is youth pitchers especially, they lack that stability of the trunk to hold that trunk posture if they do go into early arm raise, to allow the drive phase to occur, front foot strike to happen while maintaining trunk posture. So what we're seeing now is early arm raise, drive phase, approaching touchdown, and now we're seeing leakage of trunk rotation. Okay, so we don't want to leak the trunk. We want to keep the trunk and the way that the trunk rotates essentially staying compact and almost counter rotating the whole time while the hips rotate. Okay, that's what gives us that stretch, that separation that we want. So if we early arm raise, like I said, I'm seeing this a lot, instability issues, early arm raise, and then just naturally the body's like, well, we need to do something, right? We're kind of stagnant. So you see the trunk starting to rotate before front foot touches the ground. Okay, so now we're getting into front foot strike, kind of like here. Now what we're seeing is the shoulder and the rear hip have yet to kind of create any type of separation. They're in line with one another, right? So if they're in line with one another, we know that we're not creating that separation, which is going to allow us to maximize that rotational energy or torque or whatever you want to talk about. So instead of kind of just thinking about, hey, delay the trunk, let's just think about, hey, can we delay that arm raise and have our essentially our delaying mechanism occur down here, so then everything can kind of start to happen naturally and occur naturally. So then we can delay trunk, hips go into rotation. As hips rotate, now we get into that retraction, which is going to better allow us to keep our trunk posture counter rotated. Then we create that authentic separation from the hips to the shoulder. We'd see that the rear hip will now rotate while the shoulder stays in that posture. You create that separation that we want, and then boom, happens naturally without it essentially being forced separation, forced velocity. So hopefully that makes sense on early arm raise and why we want to avoid that in regards to leaking that trunk rotation and lacking separation.